Hello and welcome everybody to the latest edition of the Buy Round Interview Show. Now, the man to the left of me, it is one of the most unbelievable careers when you go through and read what you achieved and speaking to people within the game. They have you in such high regard. Welcome to the
thank
Buy
you,
Round,
Jimmy.
Bradley Clyde.
Yeah, thank you very much.
First off, so I've spoke to a number of people. They say you really changed the game. What made you? When you were growing up, was it something you witnessed? You looked at the game. What was different about your approach?
I wanted to be around the ball, where the action was all the time. So I guess that innate behaviour, I just wanted to contribute and help my team win on every play. And I guess Tim Sheen's harnessed that to a point where part of the strategy was to get to the breakdowns, which sort of meant that I had to be involved in one of the early plays, particularly when we've got the ball or in defence as well. So it was it was probably a combination of those two things that had me involved with the game. I wanted to contribute to the backline as well, wherever I could, whenever they wanted me included. So I thought that roving role for a lock forward at that time was something very much achievable, and thanks to my coaches, and they bought into that whole strategy of me just trying to add value wherever I can.
Yeah, that you used a phrase there, win on every play. How important was that psyche? Like that's an incredible attitude to go out onto a football field with, to win every single play.
Yeah, I think that is a lot of players either have it or not. But I was given the flexibility with my with the strategy and with my roving role to be able to contribute with a lot of the plays. I think that can be the difference between winning and losing a lot of the games, particularly these days when the teams are so even and the salary cap seems to be doing a pretty good job, that being completely engaged and that absolute desire to win it can be the difference of winning and losing.
Yeah. So obviously you spoke there about the influence that your coaches had. But what about a young Bradley Clyde? Like when you're an impressionable teenager, you can get off course, but you seemed like this was a part of you before you turned out in the NRL.
Yeah, I was quite lucky. My parents introduced me to a lot of sports. I played AFL from a young age and then started playing rugby league soon after, and did both for forever, swimming, tennis, soccer, whatever I could be involved in, just genuinely love sport. I made the Australian under-15s schoolboys team back in the day in 1985, and I thought at that point that I could make a career out of this. At the time, the game it was still only semi-professional, so it wasn't quite a professional from a financial point of view. I would have always had to have worked and pursued an education accordingly. But for me, that was the trigger to go, well, I really love playing this game and maybe it's something I can do long term.
Yeah. So it's something you could do long term. What was your approach as a youngster? It was just commitment to training, extras, road running, abandon all of the sports and specialise in rugby league?
So I always had a pretty methodical approach around training, and I understood for me to play rugby league, which is a very combative. I needed to put on some size and some strength, and so I started doing weights at about sort of 13, 14. I went about understanding more about sports science, and the Australian Institute of Sport came in 1980, 81, and it was a luxury in Canberra. So I utilised as much information as I could.
Because I think now information is at our fingertips, right? So you'd have to go and source that information. Like, so now I could put into YouTube, give me a strength program, and it would. I could see the same training as the best athletes in the world, but back then, like, are you reading books on training? Like,
yeah,
how did it work?
A lot of reading, a lot of specialised magazines around that special content that you're after, but conversations as well with former athletes. And Rob De Castella, for instance, he was CEO at the Australian Institute of Sport for some time. And look, I learned a great deal from Rob. He was always a hero of mine, but just being in and around that environment, I got to learn a lot about those key indicators of trying to be your best.
Yeah, because we've got actually a bit of a quote here that in your schoolboy days, there was a TV game and you won man of the match and you got a check for $100. And they asked you, what are you going to spend it on? And you replied, I'm going to buy some weights so I can train at home and get fitter and bulk up. And back then, it wasn't even, what weights and training like that wasn't even on the radar. Do you remember? Do you remember that day?
No, I don't. But that was certainly a focus when I was younger to try, and I just wanted to. I had a long-term goal. There were short-term goals amongst all that. I think goal setting is really important. And as you progress and start achieving those goals, it's time to reset those goals and continue to try and be better and better. And so that was a stage that I was going through. I made some other Australian schoolboy teams, and then suddenly there was a number of clubs interested in me. I ended up signing with my local team, the Canberra Raiders, and at that time the Raiders were coached by Wayne Bennett. The structure and the success platform was being laid over the time that him and also Don Furner were there. It was one super environment to walk into as a youngster to learn your football from, some of the mentors that were there.
Yeah, I guess the environment shapes up, but with the attitude that you had at that time as well, when you consider, your thirst for wanting to be the best possible person you can be, the goal setting, it must have just been like the stars aligned for Bradley Clyde.
It sure was, and it got even better because suddenly I was there was people exactly the same as me just starting their careers as well. I had Laurie and Ricky and Big Lazo. We were all young guys learning from Mal and Gary Belcher and Dean Lance, and Peter Jackson was very influential in the club at the time. It was a good time for learning and understanding what it took to win football games, and it isn't just what's on the field, what you see on a weekend. It's a lot more than that. It's eating, drinking, talking, walking, being a professional football player to absolutely be your best and get the performance on the field on a weekend.
Yeah, and I guess I know what it's like when you're in the moment, you don't realize it, but you must look back and almost pinch yourself that you came through with these legends. When what you were building there at Canberra, like it's absolutely incredible to be still spoken about to this day, all those years later. How do you reflect on those days? And did you know what you were building at the time, or it was just you were just living the moment?
We're all living the moment, and they're all those small moments that build into a big story. And so you're doing that daily and weekly, and then months turn into years, and then suddenly you've been performing really well together as a team for a decade, so it was an absolute privilege to play with all of those players and have so much success. But the biggest gift that I took out of the game was that I call these guys friends. You know, they're just absolute good men to have in your life, and we're all navigating our way after the being a player, and we're all at different stages, different ages, completely in different ways, but. That friendship, because you've been in the trenches with each other, I think you have that special bond.
Yeah, is that what you take away most from the sport? It's not the accolades. You value those friendships more than being inducted into the Hall of Fame and the premiership rings that you have.
For me, that's absolutely the biggest treasure that I've taken out of the game is the people that I've got to meet, where otherwise I would never have got to meet them. I'm still living the dream of something that I did as a young man. Here I am, sort of 53 years old. I'm still. It's a game that just keeps on giving.
Yeah. So you played in some of those legendary Raiders teams. Which was the? It's hard to compare, but which was the best?
I guess 1989, where we won the grand final for the first time for the Raiders, was that achievement like no other because it was all foreign to Canberrans. That was my hometown. It meant a great deal to me to win for all the Canberra people, and a lot of those players that took part in that team, they weren't household names until probably until we won that grand final, and from then on, it was a trigger for a lot of careers to really commence, and so 89 was very special, and then all of the success from there, I thought. Was just amazing. It was a magic carpet ride for me, but to be able to have that friendship in so many of the teams. So there was half at one stage. I think it was like 94, 95. It was half of the Canberra Raiders team was playing in representative football in the state of origin. You know, one half was Queenslanders, the other was New South Wales. It was phenomenal to come back to training and have those bragging rights, which is critical to be able to, whether you've won or lost. But for me, it was being able to have my peers respect you as a player and go, well, he's a tough player to play against. That was a goal of mine as well when you played against each other in State of Origin.
Was it 89 that you won the Clive Churchill?
Yes.
Yeah, as a teenager.
Yes, yeah, that's right. It was a wonderful platform to start from. And
to start from, like that. That's sure, man. I know, very, very humble, but that's incredible. What's a 19-year-old or 19?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
You're standing on the stage there with the best player on the ground, with all those legends that are in your team as well.
Yeah,
like that's phenomenal.
Yeah, magical moment. I started in that team as an 18-year-old. Wayne Bennett introduced me to the club I was training with the first graders at 17. So for me, they were by that stage my mates that just were looking to be their best and win everything. So I learnt, and the luxury that Ricky and Laurie and Lazo I had was we learnt how to win on every play through Big Mal, through all the players that were at the Raiders at the time. Gary Belcher was great. Peter Jackson was super in just driving a healthy culture for a group of young men, but a rugby league team in particular. Dean Lance, Gary Coyne, all of these older guys, they taught us how to win. And I sort of wonder what my career may have looked like if I didn't have those mentors to be able to learn from. It come down to those finer points in the game that that you can identify and either turn them into a negative or a positive, and then I look at the coaches that I had, and I was quite blessed, and I think Ricky's passion for the game stems from say Tim Sheens, who just absolutely loves the game, completely one-dimensional, completely entrenched in rugby league. I learned something new from him every time we talk, and that passion and innovation in particular, I took a lot away from Tim Sheens, just learning something new all the time. So he bred that within a culture of young men that just wanted to win all the time, and it produced some pretty good results.
Yeah, it sure did. And just with you yourself, you've got this attitude and these goals in mind, but because you changed the game, and you mentioned before, the coaches give you that freedom, that ability to do that. But are you analysing the game? Because again, it was very different back then. Not every game was on television.
Yeah.
Are you like how many hours on the training paddock because you started to ball play? You changed the way lock forwards played. Like that doesn't just happen by accident. Can you try and explain the parts of the process that went into that? How you changed how it plays, because most people just sort of rinse and repeat and do what's happening now. And
yes, well, firstly, you've got to like to think differently, and I went about trying to. I come into a team that was rock solid, full of some quality players. How do I add value to this team? And Tim Sheens provided some strategy in being able to do that. But I also found that what's my competitive advantage as a young player, and I felt as though I was fitter than most players. I really put in a lot of work to be fitter, stronger, faster, year on year. And so that was, I found. Particularly the game in 88, 89, those early 90s, where the rules were more conducive for fatigue and endurance within the game, I found the back end of each half is where I could actually have the biggest impact, because there was so much fatigue with the other players. I felt I had an engine that could be more conducive for really sort of adding some value in those last sort of 5, 6, 7 minutes of each half.
Yeah. So the fitness side of it, again, I only assume you really, that's something that came natural, but you also worked on. But with the ball playing ability, did you get much pushback from that, or did you get any teammates that were a bit, well, why is this lock forward wanting to play with the ball, and the trust that you need to have? As a bit of a ball player myself, I know, sometimes people are looking at you thinking, just don't get me smashed here.
No, so all that was encouraged at that, and it does depend on the environment that you're in and your coach, whether they give you enough rope to be able to and permission to do that. I think all that you need to have practiced it 1,000 times at training. But after you've practiced it 1,000 times at training, all the players around you understand that you do have the capacity to be able to add some value with and without the ball, to be able to create play. So, and my point of view was always, and my coaches that I've had point of view has always been the more footy players that you have on the field at one time, I think you're a better chance of winning football games. And what I mean by that is those players that really have a in detail understanding of what to do at the right time, be able to create play for other players to be able to step into a bit of space. So the ball playing, I've always thought that I could add some value in that area. It's an area I always sort of worked on, and to this day, I would encourage any front rower, back rower, anyone that feels as though that area of their game needs to be parked. Well, I disagree entirely. I think you need to be developing your skills at all times to be able to really add value. How many times, time and time again, you'll see the ball land in someone's arms when it shouldn't. It's on six tackle and they don't know what to do and they run it instead of kicking it. Or that it's moments like those where you just go, well, that should have been practiced at training.
I know what you mean. It's frustrating when professional footballers don't seem to have the ability or skill that I think that they should really.
Yes, I think that education, understanding about where they are on the football field, what tackle is it, how we've identified as a team who are the weak links within the opposition. Where are they on the field? Let's put on a play to identify those guys and expose them. Look, I think those footy players who really understand the game and know what to do and when to do them, because those opportunities only really present themselves in the tight games. They only really present themselves 4 or 5 times in a game. You know yourself, to win those games, you've got to turn those opportunities into points. If you don't, that's it.
Yeah, situational awareness is key.
Yes.
If you're not aware of your surroundings, the scoreboard, what's at stake, who's in front of you, it's so vital. Mate, in that era coming through, the culture was very different in terms of like drinking and having a good time. It was sort of moving into that professional era. Did you tip the scales? Were you one of the boys and like a good time away from the field as well?
Yeah, it was very much a pub culture when I first started, and I was never much of a drinker, but enjoyed a beer and knew that to be a part of the team, that's what you did, and I certainly didn't step away from doing that. But I was also keen to understand that transition into more of a professional approach. I always held Wayne Pearce in high regard because of the way he prepared his body for performance, and so I sort of all my behaviours moved in that direction as opposed to hanging on to that drinking pub culture, which is there's still a moment for that in today's game, and should never be lost, but in a controlled environment, of course. But I think at that time it was good to be a part of that transition away from, and it was very much semi-professional at that point. We're getting paid, not a great deal, but we're working through the week as well, and then after work you'd go to training. So it was nice to be a part of that transition into being fully professional. I spent half my career in semi-professional and then the other half in fully professional. And I think both of them have some value, but I think as a holistic person, I think you need to be educating and learning away from football. It not just to be one-dimensional and not it just have football as the key part of your life.
At the time, did you consider yourself a bit of an outlier? Like, because that's a bit away from what was the norm of, tipping the scales, work hard, train hard, drink hard.
I think so. I look, everything that I did at training, I tried to win. And I thought that was a good start. I was benchmarking myself against all the players that not just from my own club, but from other clubs as well, and you use that information and analyze it and turn it into a positive. I guess I and completely understand what team means and the positive impact it can have on everyone rowing in the same direction and really sort of giving 100% every time you train and play. So I was very committed to the team, but I was also quite committed to me being my best as an individual, and which meant doing things a little bit differently to what maybe the majority of the group may be doing.
Yeah, it's no surprise sat here speaking to you why people speak so highly of you. I can just tell by your mentality and attitude to everything football wise and life wise, why you were so successful. And we'll touch on some of those comments a little bit later that I've spoken to people around the game. When the Super League war hit, what was that like for Bradley Clyde?
It was a pretty dynamic time where a lot of change faced the game. The game was divided, and looking back now, it was damaged. It was seriously damaged. Looking back, I don't know whether we would have made the same decisions as what we did. I as a young player, just signed with the Canberra Raiders because the Raiders had signed with News Limited. But the big deal for me was I just wanted to continue playing rugby league with all my mates in Canberra. But the game was very much fractured, and that hurts. It hurts me looking back on that period and think that, well, it should have been dealt with in the boardroom and not as a consequence to the players and the fans that were impacted. But from a trigger for the professional game of rugby league, and it took us into that period, and so I look at the financially in particular was incredible. The players were then picking up often players it'd be double if not triple your pay packet. News Limited became more prominent in the promotion of the game, and we've all seen what News Limited can do for any sport or any. They'll make things happen. Very influential, and so the game just took off at that point. So as a young person, 25, I signed my Super League contract on April 1st in 1995, and it was a pretty crazy time, I can tell you.
Yeah. So you get that big deal to stay at Canberra, but what was the carrot and what was the head turner to go to the other side? What did you get your head turned quite significantly? Because I think it was the Roosters with Packer that.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, that was in the mix as well, and so I'd spoken with the Roosters just prior to Super League kicking off, and I was really honoured for James Packer drove the negotiations and requested that he picked me up from the airport and took me in to see Kerry's father, which is pretty amazing in itself in there at their Hyde Park offices. And, Kerry wanted me to sign on with the Roosters, as did James. Kerry, he was sitting back there with having a cigarette. I remember it as clear as day, having a cigarette. He'd a month before had a triple heart bypass, but still pumping the durries into him, and he said, with or without you, Clyde, the Roosters will win the grand final in 2 years. My team is the Bunnies. I've always supported the Bunnies, but my son has aligned himself with the Roosters. He's a director of the board, and I'll win the competition in 2 years with or without you, Clyde.
Did he refer to you on your second name?
To be fair, I think it was Kerry's brother. His first name is Clive.
Oh,
he may have. That could have been a reaction, but that's and I sort of took that on board and digested it, and soon after it come to a head where I had to decide Super League or the Roosters, and I remember at one stage there was I had Lachlan Murdoch on one phone, and that was the house phone, and then James had rang me on the mobile number. Where the mobiles, they were like big bricks at the time, but I had James on the phone at the very same time, so it was moments like those that you reflect back and go, well, it was a crazy time, and the players were just the pawns to be able to sell subscriptions to pay TV. And you probably didn't have the full context back then. You thought you were feeling pretty important because these people wanted to triple your pay packet, but at the same time, we were just relatively insignificant players to be able to distribute pay TV dishes.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of looking at it. But the money. It changed the game. It changed players. What does a young Bradley Clyde do with his first big pay packet when all that money started to come in?
Yeah, well, I upgraded my house, and that was the first instinct to do. And look, I always said that I train hard, and if I can get a house out of playing rugby league, I was the most blessed person in the world, and here I was at 25, 26 and I had a house. I'd overachieved.
That's not what some people would do with their money. That's very, very smart, putting it into bricks, buying yourself a house, because I can only imagine what some of the people start to splash their cash on.
Yes, and everyone's different the way they treat money and what they think where you should be spending your money. I thought that was the obvious thing. The volume of money was insane, and I don't need much to live on. The rest was all surplus. I had to put it somewhere.
Yeah, fair enough. Did you notice a change in the attitude of the players? Because money does change people. Was it the atmosphere in the dressing room? Was there a real big shift? Or
I think culturally there was a massive shift towards expectations of professionalism. I think all the coaches, clubs then pretty much overnight had expectations of players to be full-time, one, but two, commit to professional athletic approach as opposed to being a pub sport pretty much overnight.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really healthy. I couldn't wait. Having sort of come through and witnessed the impacts that the Australian Institute of Sport had as a young person, in the 80s, and then being able to be a part of that, I could play rugby league and every day of the week. I thought this is absolutely insane, and was really looking forward to that. Then and then a few years down the track, 5, 6, 7 years down the track, it can become like another job, where if you're doing stuff 8, 9 hours a day, and it can become a job, and sometimes you've got to find ways to have that spark and absolute desire. But there was a real shift in the game and people's expectations to be better and more professional in particular.
So back when you first started and you were semi-professional, what job did you have?
I started landscaping firstly when I come out of school. Yes. So that's
a tough job to be doing, and then go and train after it.
That's exactly right. Yes. No, physically it was pretty demanding, and then you'd rock up to training. And but to be fair, in those early days, as a young person, I think looking back, you should be able to do that, and you've got that much energy and zest for life, and I thought it helped my game, being physically strong during those landscaping years. I did it for about 5 years, I think, and so that meant jumping up in the Canberra winter and being at work by 7 o'clock, and then you'd after work, which was finished at about sort of 4 o'clock, you'd go to footy training at 5, and then you'd be home by 8. And then refresh, do it all again.
So you know when you won the Clive Churchill, were you landscaping like that week?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I was planting shrubs and laying pavers and that very same way. And then the following week, you go back to doing it all again.
Do I know that guy from somewhere?
That's right.
Yeah, there he is. Mate,
that's right.
That is it. Boggles the mind, like for our younger audience that were never part of that. Like, I'm just trying to imagine Nathan Cleary just landscaping, just doing his thing as he lifts the Clive Churchill.
I have heard that Craig Bellamy likes to have that philosophy where the young players come into the club and he sends them out pretty much first thing to do some labouring for that first part of
a real appreciation,
just to have that understanding and appreciation about how lucky they are to be in a professional sports environment. But and I look back and I go, I would have done it even if I wasn't getting paid. It's just and I sort of look back and go, well, and even in today's players, where I don't think you can actually make it as a first grader if you don't genuinely love the game. If you're not completely in love with the game, I don't know whether you can make it.
Yeah.
I think, and because the commitment that, I guess it's all relative, the commitment you have to have is 24/7. It's complete engagement, and if you're not 100% engaged, well, you don't make it.
Well, there'll be someone else that will.
That's exactly right.
Because there's so many competition for spaces.
Yes,
someone's ready. To take it off you. So,
and if you're only at 99%, well, there's a big gap of 1% where someone else is going to slip in there.
The slight edge and those little things, they they lead to
That's right.
big differences at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah.
Matt, I spoke about winning the Clive Churchill and then you're off landscaping. You won it in a losing team as well. One of only a handful of players to do that. What's it like when you're up there? Like,
yeah, because we'd lost. It was really disappointing. But I've never had that philosophy of being absolutely devastated. We come second. We probably should have won it. We certainly had the opportunity to win it, but we didn't. Coming second in one of the toughest competitions in the world, I was still proud about. Don't get me wrong, I hate losing anything. You can ask my kids. I won't even let them win any tennis or Scrabble. But at the same time, you've got to understand. You don't have to like it. You have to understand losing. And so that was from a team's perspective, and then to win the Clive Churchill in 91 as an individual, it was a very proud moment, and I couldn't believe they called my name out firstly, and then secondly to be able to be recognised as the best player on the field was pretty magical. You look back now and go, well. You got to pinch yourself those days. Those moments really happen.
Yeah, it would have been incredible, mate. When you look back at what you managed to achieve. I'm going to talk about representative football, and especially the Kangaroos. That it was such a big thing back then, and I've heard you speak about just how much it meant to you playing for your country.
Yeah, so I'm very patriotic, and I love this great country, but a big chunk of that is paying respects to the people before me in the game of rugby league, and then the people before them that has sort of helped shape this nation. So I look at, well, I've got the opportunity to contribute to some of that folklore and history that helps shape this nation. So I'm going to give it absolutely everything I can to pull on the green and gold jersey with the expectations that come with that. I thought was immense, and is something that I think probably has been overshadowed with State of Origin. And when you compare the two platforms, I think they sit side by side. I say that because I'm playing for my country, and I grew up thinking that there could be no greater honour.
Well, when you were growing up, your era, it was the pinnacle, right?
It was
to represent the Kangaroos.
Yes, yeah.
Like,
and
you played
tours,
State of Origin, and they picked the Australian team from that.
That's
much.
exactly how it worked. Yes. So for me, that to be able to be regarded as one of the best players out of the State of Origin. So New South Wales plays Queensland, then the Kangaroos get picked. For me, that was a part of my whole benchmarking process of where do I sit in the game, and every time you heard your name get called out to play for Australia, you knew you're one of the better players in the competition, and then the whole patriotism kicks in, and then when it is your turn to throw on the boots and play, I remember thinking I'm going to give my absolute all. This is you cross that line and it's game on.
Do you think more could be done for the international game now? Because it seems, well, it doesn't seem, it's evident that Origin has overtaken the Kangaroos. And, if you speak to players now, it's my dream is to play for New South Wales. My dream is to play for Queensland.
Yes.
It's not my dream is to play for Australia. That you don't really hear that.
Oh, look, I think it should be. I think that those tours, the international platform, has got to be reignited, and I think Mal Meninga has done a wonderful job in providing some of that that necessary cultural piece for the players to really own and be very much proud of the Australian jersey when they put it on and how much it means. I think we can help promote the game at that international level better, but that's not for me to be able to sort of have any real influence. But I certainly hope that that's something that is on the drawing board to make this make that international platform.
Well, I beg to differ, because I think people like yourself can talk about your experience, and have this generation of footballers want to play in international games, and it's going to take more than the players. I think there's other stakeholders that need to get on board and make it more of a priority. But I think you can have you can be influential.
Yes. Well, I'm really happy to have the conversation, because it's something I'm quite passionate about. But I think for any player to represent their country is a really magical moment. If you have full ownership about that country that you're representing. Like for me, it was a no-brainer. But I understand that not everyone has that same patriotism. But at the same time, the spectacle of international football, those moments where you walk out on the Wembley Oval and you're playing against the Great Britain team, it's just incredible. You remember those moments for life. And this is the experiences of the Kangaroo Tours and being in different environments and understanding that it is an international game. It's not just all about the NRL. It's played in France and Papua New Guinea, and it's a reminder that Australia is only one element to the game of rugby league. I think we all have a role to play in fostering the growth of the game, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. How were those tours? You were very successful. You won the World Cup for Australia, but the tours, they're usually a really good time off the field as well. I know some of my fondest memories on tours. Some of the victories we had were outstanding, but then we gave it a good shake after. Was that I'm assuming it was the same.
No, that's exactly right. So the Kangaroo Tour is where you're away 14, 15 weeks with a bunch of blokes that you're friends with.
Because you play in some of those where you'd play a midweek game as well. You'd play some of the club sides on some of those tours as well.
Yes,
like play Wigan, St Helens, Leeds in week. So there's a big gang of you.
That's right. Yeah. So they were the Emus and the Kangaroos. Historically, that's what they've been. The midweek team was considered the Emus. The Kangaroos are the team that played on the weekends. And look, when you weren't playing, you're helping with the strapping, lifting bags, sweeping out dressing rooms. It was a really great time. Spend 14 weeks away with some of your good mates, and you're always going to have a pretty great time, and a 1,000 stories that you come back with, again, it's those friendships that I always remember as being the reason why I was playing the game. I do remember some of those wrestles that happen in the bedrooms, and no one could out wrestle Gordy Tallis. He wasn't the strongest in the weights room or anything like that, but Gordy's super strong with the wrestling.
So that's after a few a few cold ones or warm ones over there, as you Aussies would claim.
It didn't seem to matter whether it was just after breakfast or whether it was at 12 o'clock at night. It didn't seem to matter. It was always game on.
Yeah. Who was your? Did you have a particular roommate, or did it change?
I got to roommate quite a lot with a whole bunch of players. I guess Steve Walters was one. Ian Roberts. There was Paul Sirenen, big blocker. You know, they're all blokes that you. Some of those guys, I had their footy cards only 12 months before I started playing for the Raiders. You know, and here I was.
Really?
Here I was, playing alongside them, and they're heroes to me. And so it was really cool. In 1989, here I was, 19 years old, and I threw on the Australian jersey to go to New Zealand and play with Wally Lewis. It was Steve Roach and Big Mal had a great tour. You know, some of these legends that I was now calling friends and teammates. It was pretty insane.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and get a good tour story out of you. Come on, after the '92 World Cup. Did you head off anywhere as not a Mad Monday sort of thing, but
I'm just trying to think. There was I don't know what you've heard, but I remember celebrating, probably over celebrating in '94, where I drank so much champagne out of the trophy that I was in no shape to jump up and fly to France the next day, and there was a special vehicle get me to the airport. I was still in my undies. I wasn't in any shape to be jumping onto a flight. Somehow they got me onto the flight. I walked into the airport just with my undies on, but this is sort of -1 in the morning. And mind you, it was an early flight after the winning the Ashes the day before, so I'm not quite sure who was doing the scheduling.
Yeah. Mate, is there any one, like, tours can bring the best and worst out of people as well? Was there anyone that you were just like, oh, I need 5 minutes away from you? Like you played with Wendell Saylor, who, he's all action, all energy. Was there any people that you were just give me 5 minutes away from you? Like, who was the biggest pest on those tours?
So you mentioned Wendell. He's when he first started, he'd survive on a can of Coke and a Mars bar, and phenomenal athlete. And I hope his diet's changed since. But some of there's probably one or two players in every team, isn't there, that just wired a little bit differently, and then you've got the age differences as well, where you've got the tried and true legends, and then you've got the young bucks coming through, and they're, even in terms of maturity and their mentality is often a lot different. So those conversations, I look at some of the players. I remember heading away with Sam Bacco on this one time in New Zealand, and he's where he's up the back of the bus, and I had graduated up to the back of the bus by the sort of week 3 that I was there, and listened to him and Steve Roach talking, and Sammy goes, Block, have a look at all these Maori names, all these Kiwi names. What are they? There's Makatoa, there is Krakatoa, there is, what's that one there? Takiawa? Is it Takiawa? What's that one, Sammy? Blocker, and he goes, Sammy, that's takeaway, mate. That sort of cracked me up. Sammy's been of ill health of recent times, but He never let us down in terms of coming up with some epic comments.
Oh, there's some great characters our game our game has. Oh, that's brilliant. So you were a back of the bus guy.
No, well,
or were you more of a
historically always mostly up the front, but on this occasion, I was up the back of the bus, and I think the forwards had a meeting at the back of the bus straight after training, so that's why I was up there.
That's why you snuck there. Hey, I know when you look back at your career, you have these moments, and you reflect on your performances and on what you achieved. But how do you feel when you have so many legends of the game speak so highly of you? Like, you've been inducted into the Hall of Fame. There's talk of you becoming immortal. You speak to people like Ryan Girdler, who says you were an inspiration for him. Like, so many players hold you in such high regard. They talk of you changing the game. Like, how does that make you feel? How do you digest that when you hear people? Yeah, you get the accolades like the Hall of Fame, like the Clive, Churchill, like the Premiership, but to hear people make comments like that,
it's really nice. From my point of view, it's absolute honour. I certainly didn't go about to receive the recognition, but there's a part of me that probably was seeking some of that, and there was a part of me that really did want to innovate and grow the game. And looking back, I was just doing something that I really love. So and that meant 100% engagement, and then once I had that engagement and the platform I just thought, well, I want to be my best every week, and I looked at players before me. Like I remember growing up with Peter Sterling, and Peter Sterling played well no matter who he was playing against, week in and week out, every week, and I really respected that. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to make sure that I doesn't matter who you're playing against. I wanted to one, be my best, but two, be one of the best players on the field. So that's what I sort of set about doing. There's that competitive nature that's sometimes built in that sort of makes you want to try and win everything. I think that's a healthy thing, but I'm very honoured with some of the recognition that I have received since finishing.
We're going to take a quick break from the podcast to tell you about AG1, the daily foundational nutritional drink with all your needs in the one place. I like to look after my health, and AG1 takes care of that for me. No more tablets, vitamin pills, all the health nutrition I need, all in the one place. Every single morning, it's as easy. Open up the fridge, scoop of AG1 in a glass, cold water, stir it with a fork, drink it. It tastes great, and it helps me know. It gives me the peace of mind that all my nutritional needs are taken care of, all in the one drink. It really is as simple as that. And also, anybody that knows anything about health benefits knows that it comes with adding simple routines to your day. It's not about magic pills. They're not going to work. AG1 helps me be the best version of myself by having this new habit of every single morning having that drink. I know my nutritional bases are covered thanks to AG1. A lot of athletes are now taking AG1, and with 75 high quality ingredients, it's no wonder why. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/buy round. That's drinkag1.com/buy round. Check it out. Is there any regrets from your career? Anything you would have changed?
Yeah, I was pretty easygoing with some of the decisions around. There was a couple of things. I really didn't own leadership until I was about 25, and by that I mean I was a reluctant leader. I got to a period where I understood there was other players sort of benchmarking against me. They were looking at what I was doing, and then they were sort of shaping their behaviours to be something similar. And for me, I thought that was amazing, but I was reluctant to really own my behaviours to help them be better as a leader. So that's probably one area that I could have owned leadership earlier to help more players during that time. I thought that was a little bit selfish of me. But I was just a bit of a free spirit. I was just doing my own thing. Mind you, you're only early 20s, and but I from a team's perspective and getting the absolute potential out of your team, I think I could have invested more in leadership. But only because now I completely understand the impacts that good leadership has on a bunch of young men playing the game of rugby league. It's huge. So yeah, I fully respect that. And probably the only other thing would be some of the influence that I could have had with the coaching and really understanding that my coaches, I used to just let them coach and not really invest too much in strategy, where I sort of look back and go, well, maybe I should have invested a little bit more in some of those conversations, because I really didn't add too much value into the strategy of the team.
Yeah, okay. Mate, just speaking to you now, and with that win every play attitude, was coaching ever an option, or do you ever get tapped to come in and help in a way with teams? Because I think so many players could, like the modern day player, could benefit from a bit of a chat from Bradley Clyde.
No, coaching wasn't an option for me. I understood it, and I watched Tim Sheens completely invest in rugby league. Once I finished as a player, I was quite looking forward to taking a step back. And
oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know whether I've actually done that, but so for a coach, I think we spoke about it earlier in terms of the instability of the impact that it could have on your family, moving from city to city, the uncertainty. I was looking more towards building a career of doing something, and so what that looks like was, for me, the obvious thing was to you had to adapt to the new environment, and then I went about re-educating myself, and so I did an MBA and tried to start moving in that direction to be able
post football career.
Post football,
so
yes.
you went into full-time study, or?
No. So I was at the Bulldogs at the time as there's a 2IC with the football operations manager, and studying at night with a young family. So
wow,
it was pretty interesting. But I sort of knew that I had to. Education, I thought, was a critical element around what that next step looked like, and being able to be adaptable and transition across. at that time, I wanted to be a CEO of a rugby league club. But I soon put that into the mix of being a rugby league coach, where the uncertainty, but it's very intense as well.
Yeah, it would be. It
Yes.
would be. So when you left Canberra, you went to the Dogs, couple of seasons there, you finish over in Leeds, but then so you just wanted to forget rugby league. So when you come back to us, and obviously the move back to Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do the next few years then? So you've got your MBA.
Well, it's a difficult time for anyone who's completely invested in the game of rugby league from such a young age, and then to be able to take the foot off the pedal. So those next couple of years are pretty tough for any athlete that has got to any level, because you can only reach the best if you genuinely love what you're doing. And I loved it. It was a massive part of me, and I probably underestimated how much of rugby league owned me at that time.
It does.
It does.
That's a great way,
yeah,
of describing it.
Yeah. It was a quite an interesting time, and the impact it had on my family as well. So you're not in it it's not just you, it's your kids, it's your wife. They all get impacted. And I did have the luxury of stepping back into a role with the Bulldogs, and they were fantastic for me during that period. And I went about developing sort of more of a sales and marketing skill set as opposed to rugby league.
Yeah, and you do a little bit of work for the family of league.
Yeah, it's a really good fit for me, Jimmy. I've deputy chair there. The charity for rugby league is we just changed our name from Men of League to the charity to the Family of League, just given that it reflects better of our membership and the grants that we hand out. It's been over $1 million over the last 20 years. It's and those grants will often go to children and females being a part of our great game. And so my input as a director, I've really quite enjoyed having that influence and helping the rugby league community. If and when they fall on tough times, they know that there's an organisation and our committees do an incredible job. That whole charity environment, not for profit, helping other people, but the rugby league, good rugby league people, salt of the earth, and you do anything you can to help these people.
Yeah, it is a great foundation, and it's better for having you on it. And I'm just thinking there's so many clubs that could benefit from having a man of your experience and education level and everything that you'd bring to an organisation. It's a shame you're not. Well, I understand why you're not, because of everything that comes with rugby league. But what's your day job these days? Now it's not involved in the game.
Yeah, it's I probably haven't had the scope to be able to be engaged in a rugby league club. As you know, it's a big commitment, and it can digest your whole life. I've had 3 children that I've really enjoyed spending the last 25, 26 years watching their development. They've become adults, and it's only been more recent times where I've had some scope to be able to go and do other things. So the family of leagues certainly fills that void. And I think stepping into clubland, I do enjoy some balance of life, and clubland can digest your whole life if you need to be quite mindful of that and make sure it doesn't. Yeah.
Well, rugby league, you've given the game so much, but the game's given you a lot, and your attitude of win on every play. You work in recruitment now. Is that how you see your role in that in your professional career?
It's exactly the same, and that transition, anyone or the footy players transitioning out, it's a different application, but the same discipline required. And so I'm in executive search, which is helping companies win through their senior people, and so they'll come to companies like Blenheim Partners, which is the company that I work for as a partner, and we will source their leaders that and develop a roster that's going to get their team to win, basically. And it's exactly the same approach. You need the best people in the right positions to win whatever they need to achieve, and I try and keep it as simple as possible.
Just as simple as that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. On to this part of the show. It's the Dream Spine Show. So this is brought to you by Tooheys. Tooheys are all about teamwork.
Yeah.
And no team or every team needs the spine. So this could be an incredible selection from you with the people that you've been around. So the 1, 6, 7, and 9. To complete the Dream Spine. I know there's going to be some honourable mentions along the way, but let's have at it.
Okay, at number 1, it's hard to split. Maybe we have this conversation. Mullins or Belcher? What do you do?
Yeah.
So I can't split those two. At 6, I've got Laurie Daly. I just love playing with Laurie. He could turn the game at the flick of a switch. The dynamic, but he offered a lot in leadership and as a friend as well. A really decent person.
He's one of like the most likable guys. Laurie
sure
Daly.
Is, yes.
I just there's something about him. He just puts a smile on people's faces.
And a good country guys, just strong with values and generally loves the game of rugby league, and he's given everything and so much to the game, and is still giving. At 7, I Ricky Stewart. The value that Ricky brought to the team was really quite different to Laurie. So Ricky narrated the whole game. He really completely understood the game, but offered a lot of direction. So it was the direction I see as the value that he could offer the team. And not only was he a great player, passer, kicker, strategist, but he offered the teams just quality direction and the game plan to a T. But if the game plan needed to be tweaked, he would take it upon himself, as well as consultation to Mal or to Laurie. It was never really to me, obviously his passion, wrap all that up, and he's at number 7.
Yeah, mate, like to talk about a game consuming somebody. Like,
he genuinely loves the game and completely engaged, super intense, and I love that. Playing as a fellow player that you're playing alongside with. I hardly got to play against Sticky, thank God, but I really enjoyed. I thought it was a real luxury to have him in any team that I played with.
Was the care factor as big then as it is now? Because the Canberra post match press conference is like gold. Where, if there's been a contentious issue, it's just like you can just see it means he cares so much.
Yeah, very much. He's exactly the same now as what he was back then. We completely respected the fact that he was so passionate, and his game grew accordingly. He was just so engaged and wanted to win that, and his thirst for knowledge and development of his own game. He probably lucky he had such a good coach, a development coach like Tim Sheens to help him be the best number 7 for the Raiders, because at the time he come into a club where there was already a couple of quality number 7s there. So there was Ivan Henjak, Chris O'Sullivan, and Kevin Walters were at the Raiders when Sticky come in, and so he had a bit of a job to do to just coming from rugby union, one to switch over and really be on top of your game pretty quickly in the one of the toughest arenas in the world, and then secondly to outplay not only his opposition but the other 3 guys that were in the club that wanted number 7 jersey. I
bet he got the boys fired up though when he was. I can just imagine what he'd be like to play with, just so direct with his voice and his intent.
Yeah. One good thing about Sticky, you always knew where you stood. And sometimes you'd be on the receiving end. There'd be nowhere to hide, but there was always clarity around where you stood.
How about the dummy half, the 9?
That was Steve Walters.
Steve Walters, yeah.
Yeah, another Raider, but I look at what he had to offer and very skillful and the intelligence in such a critical position probably wasn't highlighted back then as what Cameron Smith. It became quite obvious that how intelligent you do need to be at number 9 to be able to really understand the game, know what to do when to do it, situational. But Steve, I think, owned that before Cameron. I thought Steve's was the Ducks at Ipswich Grammar back in the day. I don't know how many people know that, but it's super smart. But with that intelligence brought another dimension to our game and strategy, as well as to our culture, to a club that was transitioning more into being professional, and he was every part of that. Yeah,
well, I think personally the spine needs to include a 13. So for and you can pick yourself, but I just want to quickly touch on those relationships as a ball playing lock, how important those relationships are with your 9, with your 7, because you're the link between them a lot of the time. So you got to get the ball, off your 9. So you need to be demanding it in good relationship with him. That the extras after training, catch, pass, all that familiarity. Were you having constant conversations with those guys?
Yeah, I think those side conversations that you're having is critical to just that moment that you see a half gap and you need to call a overriding call to ensure that you get the ball. One, that person needs to understand, respect that you've had an overriding call and you need to get the ball. But the two, they've got to have respect in your capability and know that you're going to offer the team something. I think those little side conversations and are critical, whether they're at training, whether they're on the field in the moment. There's those key relationships with your spine, but I think also encouraging your some of the forwards in particular when they are tired and they need to do a decoy run for you, that you are you do that in the right way. I always found you've got to you can't just say, well, can you run a decoy run for me? It was always their name, because if you said their name, they were more engaged and they had some more ownership around it. I tried to make sure that I was there for them, whenever there was a decoy run required. It's those little extra efforts that I think make you a team player, and who other players want to play with, because they knew that they could rely on you and get some value.
Yeah, well, you are sure one of them. And that section is all thanks to Tooheys. We got 3 questions we ask each and every guest. So if football didn't exist or you hadn't have made it, we've spoke about a little bit of this, but are you landscaping still or are you recruiting? Where would you be without football?
I'd be involved with sport in some way. I would think I would have stayed in sport, but I also would have understood that education was a key part of my future. So I do enjoy learning and trying to be better. So I think I would have. The academia side of it would have interested me, but more than likely still on the tools, landscaping and planting. I really don't know, but I some of those other sports that really interested me. I was playing AFL and I felt I had a little bit to offer there, but I was playing a lot of tennis. I really enjoy my tennis and golf. I'm just not very good at golf.
So you're big into, because Canberra's a bit of a hotbed for both sports, isn't it?
Spot on. Yeah, that's right. Sits between Sydney and Melbourne. Culturally, they're very different, the AFL and the NRL. But so consequently, I played both, and which allowed me to understand both games, and I was engaged in both of my. In fact, my parents said to me, "We're sick of running you around to training sessions all the time. You've got to pick one or the other." And that was when I was 14. So,
oh really?
Yeah, and it was a tough decision, but so that was about 14, and I made the Australian schoolboys at 15, and that was probably a trigger for me to. I was glad that I stayed, that I chose rugby league. I guess looking back now, the Raiders come into the competition in 1982, and that provided a pathway for me to be able to go and play rugby league at the highest level.
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't specialise kids too early and they only play the one sport from such a young age. There's actually a lot of research that's out there that you should be a generalist, especially as a youngster, and specialise later. And I think I've actually read up on it, a couple of books on athlete development and how it's the Roger Federer versus Tiger Woods debate, where Tiger was given a golf club at 2 months and that's all he ever did, versus Federer, who only actually started playing tennis, I think at 14 or 15, but played a multitude of sports growing up, and it likely benefited you because a lot of the skills are transferable as well, and I think youngsters should apply themselves to as many sports as they can possibly do.
Very much. And as parents, I think we probably have that responsibility of trying to introduce a variety of sports to your children, and I think that's can offer them a really good start in life.
A sliding doors moment, or the most impactful sliding doors moment. So I often think about, well, what would life have looked like if I'd have stayed in England? Think back and look at that. Obviously, I didn't. It was a bit of a sliding doors moment for me. But how about you?
There was a moment in, I think it was 92, where I was offered the New South Wales captaincy. John Quayle was on the end of the phone. Here I was, 22 years of age, and I turned it down.
Wow.
And the reason I turned it down, because I didn't feel as though I could justify leading guys like David Gillespie and Benny Elias and the older statesmen within that team at the time, to really, because I was so young. So I look back and think that was a moment that I probably, and my philosophy since has been just say yes and make it happen, because if you've got the inclination and the capability, that you should say yes and just try and make it happen. I should have done that at that moment instead of passing up the captaincy.
Wow, so it was just out of respect for the...
Yeah, I didn't feel qualified enough to be able to lead these players that have been around the game for a lot longer than me, but and they probably deserve to be considered rather than me.
How many Origins had you played at that point, at 22?
I'd played, I'd probably played half a dozen.
Wow, that's such a mature decision for a young man.
Yes. It was a tough decision, and I sort of look back and go, well, that was certainly one of those sliding door moments where you just go, well, I probably would have made a different decision with knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. The most interesting person that you've met along the way?
Oh, really fortunate to have met some pretty incredible people. I do tell the story, and the 97 Kangaroos team, I don't know, we had the luxury of catching up with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman at a Russell Crowe concert. The 40-foot Ide of Grunt, I think Russell invited us to a pub in Balmain where his band was playing. And guess what? I've got Nicole Kidman, who's a good friend, and her husband, Tom Cruise, coming along. And so we spent the afternoon catching up with Tom, and he's just like you and I, just a good, genuine bloke, really interested in understanding more about what we did as footy players. So that was pretty cool. And just the other day, I caught up with a bit of a child hero who is not an athlete or a movie star, but Andrew Denton was a really funny Australian identity, and it still is, mind you. Got to play some tennis with him during the week. Look, I'm really blessed to have to have those conversations and to meet some of those people that influence not only your life but others.
Yeah, well, Bradley, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you on the show. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your stories. It's been really interesting to get into the psyche of you, especially as a youngster coming through. And I think that win every play attitude can be so impactful, and that was obviously the foundation to your success, and is the foundation as well. It's leading into life after football. Well, a lot of your life after football as well. So, but thank you for joining us here on the Bye Round.
Absolute pleasure, James. Thank you.